I was around 12 years old at that point, so of course. Have you ever received a positive comment about your art that affected the way you approached it? How about a negative comment? For me, it was the latter. Two comments to be specific. And, unbeknownst to me, they affected my mindset towards art for years, to the point of it being a huge roadblock. Let's talk about it. Today I'll be doing a copy of two manga pages. It's Vagabond by Takehiko Inoue. I'll be working with a sketch here, choosing a nib and ink on a cheap sketchbook. So this is what you are going to be seeing here throughout the video. When I was a little kid, probably about 5 or so, I used to grab pages of handwritten stuff, turn them around, and trace the letters on the back. Now, I didn't know how to read or write, but I was eager to learn. It was the closest thing I could get at the time. I still remember spending time tracing page after page of backwards letters and having a lot of fun, which is ironic because my handwriting is terrible now. Fast forward a couple of years and 8 to 9-year-old me became obsessed with Sailor Moon. I'd collect Sailor Moon anime comics magazines. Yes, anime comics, as in screenshots from the anime arranged in a comic format. I managed to fill out tote bag with these things. The same company also published Sailor Moon coloring books. I started using them to trace. Of course, I had fun coloring in the actual book, but I found it even more fun to trace the pretty drawings. I'd take the finished pieces, in lined paper of course, and show my relatives. They'd go, "That's nice, honey," and I'd be on my merry way. And just so you know, I wasn't hiding my tracing. I even used to sell trace drawings of Garfield in my class. The other kids watched me doing it and would pay me for it. I still have no idea why. So, of course, I thought I wasn't doing anything wrong or deceiving anyone. But one day I was busy tracing stuff when a family member walked in and saw me doing it. They looked at me, disappointment clear in their eyes, and said, "You're tracing them? I thought you were doing them from scratch. Anyone can trace." I know they probably didn't mean any harm, but I stopped tracing, even though it was fun for me. It became something I shouldn't do. It was cheating. And if you're thinking, well, that's technically true, put a pin on it, I'll come back to that. As for the second comment, it was about copying. Years passed by and every once in a while I tried copying a Sailor Moon drawing or other things. It was just a thing I did here and there, until one day one of my aunts saw me draw a flower. She and other relatives were convinced that I should buy art supplies because I had talent. Not really. That's how I started my art journey, funnily enough. I ended up buying a lot of art supplies that I didn't use because I was afraid of wasting them. Story of my life. I eventually made my way back to anime. I searched up online tutorials, books, etc. But I started copying manga panels, and it was fun. Some of my first copies were from Junji Ito's Tomie. So there was this time I was copying a panel from Battle Angel Alita, or Gonmu, where she only had one eye. It was on a big piece of paper, so it took a while. Then another relative asked me what I was doing. I showed them the manga and they looked at my drawing. And they said, "Why are you copying? There's no point to that. You shouldn't copy stuff and you should do things on your own." I was around 12 years old at that point, so of course I got angry. But I didn't really say anything and simmered in silence. I didn't agree with them, but somehow I didn't look at copying the same way after that. That comment planted a seed in my subconscious mind and sprouted in the shape of, why bother? There's no point in copying. It's not as important or worthwhile as drawing from imagination or real life. So I basically avoided doing copies after that, and if I did, I felt the need to not show them or diminish their importance. I even remember doing a journal drawing back in 2020. When my partner saw it, I said, "Well, it's just a copy," as if I was trying to hide it away from all the prying eyes. It just felt off to show it to others. You might be saying, well, these things couldn't have affected your growth as an artist that much, right? And you will be perfectly wrong. You see, I've been stuck in a limbo between beginner to intermediate artist for the longest time. I'd see younger artists who'd been drawing for less time than me and think, what am I doing wrong? I don't believe in innate talent. So I knew that it wasn't a question of me not being talented enough, whatever that means. It was something different, but I didn't know exactly what. Had other artists found some obscure practice method? Did they just have tons of time? Or did they sell their soul to Cthulhu? And the answer is rather simple. I'd say it's a combination of mileage and learning. Tracing and copying gives you a mix of both, which are things most artists don't really have a problem doing. There is something else as well, of course, but I'll come back to that later. If you're wondering why tracing is important at all, you're probably thinking of those people who trace other people's art and pass it off as their own on the internet. Yeah, don't do that. That's not okay. But going back to when I was a kid, what was I learning? Hand-to-eye coordination. I was teaching my hand to do lines that I wasn't used to. I was learning muscle memory. A lot of people, especially those who are not in contact with absolute beginners, tend to forget how vital this is, and I know I did. And if you're not a beginner, tracing is an excellent tool to study other artists' shape language and line control. At least that's what I've heard posts suggesting. Not to mention the two most common uses of tracing, which are sketching and inking. We all clean up our sketches, right? That is a form of tracing. And then there's inking. You're literally tracing your or someone else's sketch. Obviously, there's a lot more than just tracing, but the idea is basically that. Maybe me tracing letters as a kid was some kind of foreshadowing that I'd eventually enjoy inking as an adult. As for copying, when we're learning something new, we start by copying, right? With math, you learn by following the teacher's or textbook's examples. At work, you shadow someone else until you get the hang of it. With dancing, you also have to copy someone else's steps. You get the picture. But somehow I didn't relate this to art. There's even this little thing called master studies that every pro artist talks about. I guess my brain just assumed that they meant really old artists. Like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and the other Ninja Turtles. I just didn't think it applied to the manga artists I liked. I've been a fan of Vagabond ever since I was in high school, which is now a long time ago. But I've always loved Inoue's art. Any fan who is an artist will have a lot of copies of his art, right? Well, not me. I just recently started doing copies of his work, and this is the first full reproduction of his manga pages that I've ever done. And from this, I learned so much to the surprise of absolutely no one. It isn't just about style or proportions, but seeing and feeling how he draws certain things. How his hatching conveys volume, the compositions. It's like several things are unlocking in my brain, like more options are opening up to me. And it's insane. Imagine I had never stopped copying. I'd have tons of these drawings by now. And it's not just the mileage by itself, although that is important, but it's also the confidence. It's like your parents holding you over the water when you're learning how to swim. The artists you copy are doing the heavy lifting of anatomy, composition, etc., while you do the basics. You're basically slowly building your confidence until you're ready to do it on your own. And because I never built confidence this way, I became afraid of failure. And that's the other thing I wanted to touch on, perfectionism. Funnily enough, that's something I didn't realize I had. I always thought I was sloppy, but I always measured a copy's worth against how alike or not it was to the original. But I guess it's just as they say, that the point is the journey and not the destination. The importance of a copy or master study is what you pick up along the way. The result isn't as important as having done it. And just seeing my copies not looking much like the original, even this page makes me cringe a little. I changed this guy's face structure and looks like an entirely different character. But this is one of the reasons why I chose not to do a sketch of these manga pages. Having the option to erase gives an opening to my perfectionist side. I don't want to fall into a loop of correcting a sketch over and over to make it match the original perfectly. Coming into it this way, I knew I was going to make mistakes, and I'd have to be okay with that. and that means that I have to move on no matter what. It was really hard for my brain, but guess what? I was having fun. And that brings me to my last point. A lot of artists are able to progress quickly because they're having fun. When something is fun, you want to do it more often, right? It's a no-brainer. But a lot of us artists get so caught up with wanting to improve that, ironically, it stunts us. The more pressure and expectations you put on yourself, the harder it is to actually practice. Therefore, the harder it is to improve. So, we should just shift our mindsets, right? Easier said than done. Even though I know this, I'm still struggling with it a lot. And I don't think I'm alone in this. In the meantime, I'll continue to do copies and tracing. Not just because it's walking behind the steps of giants, but because it's fun to do so. What about you? Have you had similar experiences with art? Share your stories or tips down in the comments. If you want to see me do more reproductions from other mangas, please let me know as well. Thank you for watching!